A movie lives or dies on its understanding of structure and audience expectation. You get it right, everything falls into place. You get it wrong, and, well, I'll cover that in another video. Because today, we're talking about a movie that got it right. A Quiet Place. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen A Quiet Place, pause the video, go watch it again, and then come back. All right. I love the structure of A Quiet Place. From a story perspective, A Quiet Place does everything that audiences expect it to do. It turns multiple perceived weaknesses into strengths. It excels at show don't tell, obviously. It has great setup and payoff that doesn't feel overly manufactured. And it has a built-in ticking clock that doesn't just function as a story device, but it ties all of the characters' arcs and themes together while advancing the plot in a logical and satisfying way. But the film also does something completely outside the bird box. Before I spill the beans on how John Krasinski performed some cinematic sleight of hand, let's briefly talk about what audiences expect in a traditional three-act structure. In a traditional three-act structure, you'd introduce the audience to the ordinary world or the status quo, and then have an inciting incident disrupt that ordinary world around page 12 to 15. From there, the characters would figure out how to deal with the impact of the inciting incident, and their decision is what would launch them into Act 2. That's called the Act 1 turn or the lock. It generally happens around page 25 to 30, and it sets up the character's first mission, which is the front half of Act 2. That gets upended in some meaningful way at the midpoint, roughly around page 55, and from there the characters are forced into a new mission. That mission pushes the plot into Act 3, the climax, the fallout from the climax, and the establishment of a new world. The cleanest example of this is Luke getting Leia's message in Star Wars. That's the inciting incident because it upends Luke's ordinary world. But it doesn't thrust him into space to deliver the Death Star plans to Alderaan. Luke leaving Tatooine does. That's the Act 1 turn, with the first mission being get the plans to the rebellion. When Alderaan is blown up, that plan falls apart, and at the midpoint, our heroes are sucked into the Death Star, and mission 2 kicks in. Rescue Leia. That pushes us to the climax, where Luke is now officially part of the rebellion, and he goes from zero to hero by destroying the Death Star. And of course, we end with everybody getting medals as the new world is established. With that in mind, let's pretend we're outlining the story to A Quiet Place on a beat board according to this formula. What would you expect to happen and where? Well, first off, if we're not going to start with Invasion Day, then the ordinary world has to be what the world looks like on day 89 post-invasion, which is where A Quiet Place kicks off. Beau's death is the clear inciting incident of the film because it disrupts the status quo and it sets the Abbott family down the path towards the Act 1 turn. And a side note, Krasinski has confirmed that Jaws is a major influence on A Quiet Place. There's even a storefront in the sequel named Brody's Pizzeria. Beau's death has a clear parallel to Chrissy's death in Jaws, but unlike in Jaws, where Chrissy's death doesn't upend Brody's status quo, that happens when her body is discovered, Beau's death directly impacts our main characters. That's why Beau's death acts as both a teaser and an inciting incident. Back to the formula. If Beau's death is the inciting incident, what is it pushing towards? What is the Act 1 turn? For me, that's Evelyn's pregnancy. In a more traditional script, this moment would be highly dramatized. The film's timeline indicates that around 3 months after Beau's death, Evelyn gets pregnant. That's a massive emotional shift from grieving the loss of a life to planning for the arrival of a new one. Was it planned? Was it an accident? Was there a moment of doubt where they considered whether bringing a life into this world was a mistake? Who knows? We don't know. Why? Because that's not the story that Krasinski wanted to tell. And so he didn't. Still, the pregnancy, now that's a problem that needs solving. And it functions as a perfect Act 1 turn. Not only does it force the entire family into action, it establishes the first mission, the first half of Act 2. Figure out a way for Evelyn to give birth in silence and find a way to keep a crying baby safe and alive in a world where sound can get you killed. Now compare that to what Krasinski actually did. A Quiet Place breaks all the beat sheet rules for the first half of the film. The inciting incident happens 10 minutes in, and the Act 1 turn takes place off screen moments later before the time jump. When we pick the story back up, we're introduced to a new status quo with the family already in the middle of mission 1, soundproofing the basement and getting everything ready for the birth. The midpoint, where Evelyn goes into labor, that happens around the 50-minute mark, which brings us back in line with traditional storytelling. From there, we get our second mission, reuniting the family, abandoning the house, and that swiftly takes us to our all is lost moment, which is Lee's sacrifice and his posthumous victory over the monsters that he shares with his daughter, with Regan, the hearing aid that he'd been working on the whole movie. So was this a massive mistake? Did Krasinski simply skip reading Sid Field's screenplay? No. Krasinski knew exactly what Field, McKee, and Snyder had to say about structure, and more importantly, he understood the meaning behind that structure, and that's how he was able to subvert it. Now, obviously, I haven't spoken to John Krasinski about any of this. My only connection to Krasinski is that we've both worked with the director Ken Kwapis in the past. Still, I think it's fair to say that he knew what he was doing here, so let's just pretend that this is all fact. Anyway, let's start with the inciting incident. Krasinski knew that padding the opening of the film just so that Beau's death could take place 5 minutes later would have only made the audience restless. After all, did we really need 5 more minutes of walking around in silence? Would we have connected more with Beau in that time so that when the monster takes him, we're more emotionally connected to him? No, I don't think so. So instead of forcing the formula, Krasinski just simply abandoned it. As for the Act 1 turn, or the lock, Krasinski decided not to dramatize the pregnancy at all because that's not the movie that he wanted to make. This isn't a story about having to choose between surviving and living, it's a story about doing whatever it takes to protect the ones you love. So instead of muddying the theme, Krasinski simply fast forwarded to what compelled him to make the movie in the first place. Krasinski chose to focus on character and family dynamics instead of plot points and jump scares, and essentially gave us a 90-minute long Act 2 with a teaser in the beginning of the movie and a climax at the end, all masquerading as a traditional 3-act film. And that's the craziest thing about A Quiet Place's structure. And he nailed it. How? Title cards. Krasinski uses 3 title cards in the first act of A Quiet Place. Day 89 for the opening, day 472 at the 10.5-minute mark after Beau is killed, and day 473 right around the 25-minute mark in the movie. It's really that third title card that's the most manipulative. Why? Because it plays into the audience's internal movie clock. Krasinski knew that at the 25-minute mark, the audience would be expecting the Act 1 turn. And he also knew, I suspect, that he didn't really have an Act 1 turn. Whether intentional or not, the effect is the same. At exactly the moment the audience expects a turn, the film gives them a signal of progression without actually delivering one. Now, sure, you can make an academic argument about how this shift from day 472 to 473 is a true Act 1 turn because day 473 is where the shit really hits the fan, but to me, that's just retrofitting the film to fit the formula. Objectively speaking, what changes after that title card? Nothing. Nothing. At least not anything as concrete as Luke leaving Tatooine or Marty going back to 1955. And it's interesting to note that once the film hits the midpoint, we don't get any other title cards, not even at the end of the film. And that could have easily been done by cutting from Evelyn cocking the shotgun, day 474. That would have been just as satisfying to the audience, or at least to me, as cutting to black. But who cares? Krasinski accomplished exactly what he wanted to do, and the audience didn't even know he was doing it. So what's the final takeaway for new writers, unestablished writers, anybody trying to advance in competition, or just write a compelling screenplay? You don't have to follow a formula to write something amazing, but you do have to understand the purpose behind the formula so that when you do break it, it's deliberate. If you do that, your audience will reward you for it. Now, in my next video, I'll break down a film where the writers strictly followed the traditional 3-act formula, but because they didn't understand the purpose of the formula, they failed miserably. Joker. So I hope you stay tuned for that. And if you disagree with me, I hope you put that in the comments down below. If you think I missed anything about A Quiet Place or if I misinterpreted anything, put that in the comments as well. Until next page, I'm Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In, a channel dedicated to the art of screenwriting.